This conference will now be recorded.
Testing 1, 2, 3. How's my volume? Good. Good for you.
So somebody is out there, I can hear you typing.
Are we waiting on somebody, Travis, or?
I don't know. No, waiting on me.
Official atomic clock or not, but
I didn't see that it was past 7. I apologize. We can get going. Are we expecting Tiffany by any chance?
Hello?
you're on mute,
All right.
Melissa, if you're trying to talk.
Hello, Embassy Neighbors. This is Erica here. I know it's kind of confusing from getting on the city website, but I believe we're all here, and I think if your mics are muted, everyone can hear you.
Okay. Well, I think it's time to get started. So I'm going to call this meeting of the Woodland Planning Commission to order. Number 4 seems to be a canine joining us. If that could perhaps be muted, that would be fantastic. The role of the Planning Commission is to hold workshops to review and make recommendations to the City Council on all manner of policy and legislative activities. In some cases, we act as a quasi-judicial board for land use cases, which can then be appealed to either the council, the hearing examiner, or the court. I don't believe that's the case tonight. Tonight's Planning Commission we're holding as a conference call because of the plague, but we will follow the same procedures that we use for our meetings that are usually at council chambers. Be 2 opportunities for public comment tonight. There'll be one at the beginning for items that aren't on the agenda, and then again after the staff and applicant presentations for our public hearing. So let's see, if you wouldn't mind putting your microphone or telephone on mute until it's time for you to speak, that would be fantastic. It's going to be recorded. And all right, so our agenda roughly is a call to order, which I'm doing right now. Then we'll do citizen communications for items not on the agenda. Then we'll approve the agenda. Then we will approve the minutes. We'll have a public hearing on the Woodland Creek Planned Unit Residential Development, have some staff reports, and then we'll be all done. So before let's do a roll call. Janice, could you call the roll for us? If not, I can do it.
Hello, can you hear me?
For a second. Yep.
There we go.
Can hear you.
Now can you hear me? Okay,
Yes.
great. Brian Matson,
Present.
Kel Jensen,
Hi.
Jason Lugo,
Present.
Sam Nigro,
Here.
Tiffany Witten. Not here. Thank you.
All right. Fantastic. So next up, we're going to have citizen communications for items that aren't on the agenda. I guess we can just see how it works. Give us some indication. Shout if you have something to talk about on the agenda. If too many of you, we'll find another way.
I need a battery on it.
Okay, Mary Jensen, why don't you mute your phone?
Mary Jensen is having a stand-in. Grant Jensen is going to speak for me.
Okay, well, why don't you, until that time, why don't you mute your microphone so you can work that out.
It says it's unmuted.
But he wants us to mute it.
I wanted to mute it. Perfect. All right. Great work. So just one last call because that was confusing. Anybody have comments for things that aren't on the agenda? Okay. All right. Next up then is approving the agenda.
Oh, so mean.
So for that, I will need a motion from a commissioner.
All right, I approve that we approve the agenda.
And a second.
Second.
All right, motion's been made and seconded to approve the agenda. Is there any discussion on that? All right, let's go ahead and do a quick vote on that. Anyone opposed to approving the agenda? No one's opposed. The motion passes. Let's move on to our consent items, which is approving the minutes. And for that, I would need a motion from the commission.
I move that we approve the minutes from last meeting.
Okay. Can I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Motion's been made and seconded to approve the minutes from our November meeting. Anybody have any discussion about that? Anything wrong with the minutes, the draft minutes? I didn't see any either. So let's go ahead and take a vote on that. Anyone opposed to approving the minutes from our November meeting? All right, that motion passes 2 then. Moving right along to our public hearing. 1 second, Okay, so first public hearing is Shoreline Master Program Periodic Review. That's CPA-20-0001 and CEP 20-005. Staff and the commission will discuss updates to the City of Woodland Shoreline Master Program. The city is conducting a periodic review of the Shoreline Master Program as required by the State Shoreline Management Act. Updates will reflect changes to state laws, including process improvements, new definitions, clarified codes, and changes that reflect inflation for construction costs. Minor corrections to the shoreline map are included in an effort to correct errors and oversights. No changes to shoreline policies are expected, and there is a memo packet involved. So let's see. I think Travis or Melissa have some news on this. Basically, we need to continue the meeting. I don't know if there's anything to say about that, or if we should just have a motion to continue. Travis, you're muted.
So I do have a quick presentation. Let me know if you can see my...
We can see your screen, but it is not, your presentation is not maximized. That looks good enough to me.
Okay. So the shoreline hearing that we had scheduled for tonight the Department of Ecology has asked us to reschedule this. So on our website, there is a draft ordinance available for review. It's what we talked about in our November workshop. The ordinance number is 1468, and there's also draft amendment language available on the website. The Ecology and Planning Commission joint public hearing is scheduled for February 18th, 2021 at 7 o'clock, and it'll also be in this same format. If possible, at that time, 200 East Scott Avenue, the council chambers, might be an in-person meeting if we're available to do that at that time. The next steps that we had talked about at the workshop is staff has issued a non-project SEPA DNS, and it was issued and the comments are due by December 21st, 2020. So if you review that information, you still have time to comment on that. We've issued the draft ordinance, and the public hearing, which was advertised, has been continued, and we will work with Department of Commerce to start our 60-day review process. That'll get started as soon as I hear back and get confirmation from the and the Planning Commission will make a recommendation. It'll be forwarded to City Council at the next available meeting, so that should be sometime in March. So online resources are available, so please check our website on our Shoreline update page. Do you have any questions for me on that?
I don't have any questions. Commission, anybody else have any questions?
No.
I don't have any questions.
Okay, fantastic. And for the public, that gives us at least 60 more days to comment on it. So that seems all right. So I guess next up is a motion to continue then.
I'll second it.
Well, why don't you make it first?
I thought you were making it, Tal. I
I'm
move
sure-
that we
I'm sure
continue
you
this until the date that Travis was indicating.
will. Okay, motion to continue has been made. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, motion's been made and seconded. I am just now remembering that Janice likes to know who makes motions and seconds them. So I heard Brian make that motion. Who was it that seconded?
Jason.
Jason. All right. All right. Motion's been made and seconded to continue this hearing to our regular February meeting. I think we better do a roll call vote on that. Janice, do you mind calling a vote?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Great. Yeah, I've lost my picture completely, so I'm kind of running blind here. Okay, so roll call vote. Tel,
Yes.
Sam,
Yes.
Jason,
Yes.
Brian.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. So the motion passes. And with that, I think we'll move on to our next item on the agenda, which is the Woodland Creek Planned Unit Residential Development Subdivision, PUD-20-001/BLA-200-004/CAP-20-002 and 3/FLD-20-002/SCP-20-13. I don't know if I actually need to do that, but it's kind of fun. The applicant proposes dividing approximately 41.17 acres into 150 residential lots, ranging from 3,500 square feet to 10,280 square feet in the low-density residential 8.5 zoning district. The development will include a number of innovative design techniques, a 14-acre open space tract with public nature trail, and a street connection between Statesman Drive and Lewis River Road at the intersection of McCracken Road. The site is located at 2336 Lewis River Road. All right. Any member of the commission have any ex parte communication or conflicts of interest that they need to declare?
Nope.
All right, that sounds like no. So let's move on to a staff presentation.
Thank you very much. So the project we're talking about is the Woodland Creek subdivision. This is the vicinity map showing the property indicated in red, and it's adjacent to State Route 503. The site is 41.17 acres in size. The zoning is low density residential 8.5. The proposal is for 150 lots, of which they will have a 14-acre open space tract plus 2 stormwater tracts and street and pedestrian cross connections in this project. This is gives you an idea of the planned unit residential development proposal. It's divided into 2 phases. The first one approximately follows this red line, and it is the north half, and it includes improvements to McCracken and State Route 503, plus the internal roads, stormwater and water and sewer improvements, pedestrian cross connection to the north, the open space tract, and it will also include the sound wall for that's being installed along State Route 503. Phase 2, which is the southern half, will actually include the cross connection to Statesman and the pedestrian connection to the school. Now I bring these up because this is approximately what's proposed, but this final boundary may change during the final engineering for this project. So they'll have to take a look at the utility provisions and how to get the water and sewer connections So they may ultimately change this, but I just wanted to make sure that people understand that the entire subdivision may not occur as a single project. The planned unit residential development allows for flexible development standards, and it includes flexible street standards, increased density from 6 to 12 acres. And this project that's being proposed and discussed tonight is approximately 7.09 net units per acre. So that's taking out the road right-of-way dedications and the open space tract. So the remainder of the parcel, that's how we get the net density. The planned unit residential development allows for 50% or lot sizes to be 50% of that required by code. And a density transfer for critical areas is allowed. That's what helps get the density of 12 units per acre. But in this case, it does not look like they are needing to do any critical area density transfer. So the subdivision lot sizes, proposed lots are between 3,500 square feet and 10,280 square feet. The planned unit residential development allows for the average lot size to be 50%, that allowed under code. And that would allow average lot sizes to be 4,250 square feet. And the applicant is proposing a subdivision that has 5,576 square feet per average lot. So that meets the PURD code. Now the code also allows for 10% of the lots to be smaller than the average lot size. And in this case, they are requesting 10% of the lots or 15 of them to be smaller than allowed, the minimum lot size. And those lots can be as small as 3,600 square feet. Now you'll notice that the smallest lot size proposed is 3,500 square feet, and that is actually too small as allowed by code. So staff has had this discussion with the applicant, and condition number 25 remedies this by the 5 3,500 square foot lots will have to be at least 3,600 square foot lots prior to recording of the plats. Now the subdivision itself, the transportation issues that were reviewed include internal circulation streets. There are some smaller than normal streets that are allowed under the planned unit residential development, and it includes some 28-foot streets. And according to the fire code, if you have less than a 30-foot square feet, 30-foot road surface, that you are limited to parking only on one side. So that will be required on these 28-foot streets. State Route 503 frontage improvements will be required along the frontage of this project. They are required to do cross connection, and that is provided from Statesman to State Route 503. There are going to be pedestrian connections both to the north outside of the city limits and to the school district itself. So there will be opportunities for students outside of the city limits and within this development to approach the school either on sidewalks on State Route 503 or on a pedestrian connection to the subdivision itself on the west side of the school property. And also the applicant will be responsible for paying impact fees for growth-related project that the city is planning. Now, it's also important to note that according to the Department of Transportation, State Route 503 stormwater needs to be routed to a dedicated facility, and the applicant has proposed that as part of the development. Now, there's also going to be some discussion about flood hazard protection and flooding issues on this site. What you see on the left here is the flood map for the city of Woodland, and the property is kind of in the center of that picture. The dark gray is 100-year floodplain, and the light gray is outside of the floodplain. It's in the 500-year flood event. So that is gives you an idea of what we're looking at here. you'll notice that much of the site and much of the developed or the area that's proposed for development is actually outside of the floodplain, the 100-year base flood elevation. So it's important to note that much of the city is in floodplain and only a portion of this site is in the floodplain. The flood water is associated with the backup in the creek. So you'll notice at the northeast corner that there is a culvert that goes under State Route 503, and the elevation of the Lewis River during flood events is actually above that culvert. So there is not water that actually backs up underneath 503. What we're experiencing on the west side of the road is the Robinson Creek and the unnamed creek that comes down by Gun Club Road. That water has nowhere to go. So what we're seeing is a backing up of water as opposed to Lewis River water that's actually flooding into Robinson Creek. And it's also important to note that flooding is a natural condition in the floodplain, and the flood ordinance does allow for access, storage, and parking as a permitted use in the floodplain, and that the floodway will not be affected by this project. So there are substantially higher development standards and requirements if you're trying to develop in a floodway, and this project does not have floodway in the project. So that kind of is a segue into the stormwater. Stormwater will be collected internally, and it will meet the current city standards. So the stormwater facility for this project is in a dedicated tract. That tract will be maintained by the developer or the homeowners association for at least 2 years. And once it can be demonstrated that it is working and functioning as designed, then it would be turned over to the city for ongoing maintenance of that stormwater facility. Erosion control is being proposed and will have to meet the city's erosion control standards. And the applicant will be providing utilities like water, sewer from the city. And then they will also be providing private utilities like electricity and gas from the private utility purveyors. The critical areas are shown on this map, and there's also a copy of this in the staff report. And the critical areas will be placed into a tract, which will be covered by a conservation covenant. There will be signage for the conservation area, and there will be demarcation in the form of fencing along the edge of that barrier. And so there will be some additional discussion with the applicant regarding maintenance of that area, and that'll be part of the conservation covenant discussion. Now, I also know that Ecological Land Services submitted an additional letter, but it was too late for me to include it in this presentation. So hopefully the applicant will be able to address that. And I think I see George Fornes on the meeting, so we might be able to get Fish and Wildlife to weigh in on that as well. So the subdivision will address school impacts, and they will be mitigated by impact fees paid to the school district. Parks and recreation impacts will be mitigated by the open space tract, sidewalk and pedestrian cross connections, and also park impact fees. Fire protection will be addressed by fire hydrants being constructed on the site, and fire impact fees will also be connected for each of the residences that is built. And fire protection, we note that there is a new officer levy that started in 2020. So the city is in the process of hiring additional police officers that will be funded by that levy, and that's an ongoing process. So each of these homes will also be paying into that to help fund police protection. So there were a couple last minute issues. There was a letter by the Department of Ecology, and they wanted to weigh in on floodplain management, critical area preservation, solid waste management, in this case, fill soil, the quality and the cleanliness of fill materials, and also water quality concerns. And I did produce a supplemental agenda memo, and those are available online. And all of the issues that were raised by Department of Ecology had been covered by our staff report. So no additional conditions or findings were required for the Department of Ecology comments. And also, we received a letter which was emailed to the applicants, or I'm sorry, to the Planning Commission. This was just right before the meeting this afternoon. Mr. Shoemaker submitted a letter about the Lynch and McKay properties that are to the northeast and adjacent to this site. And the property owners are interested in the extension of water and sewer, and they suggested alternative methods for connecting those lots. And staff has reviewed that, and it is always an option to include that as part of the final engineering, but that request is not part of this subdivision that is before you here today. So if you have any questions about that, you can go ahead and ask me, but just so you know that we will work with the applicant, but it's not necessarily anything that you have to deal with tonight. And lastly, the staff recommendation is that staff finds that as conditioned, the project meets the applicable state and local codes, and we recommend approval with conditions as outlined in the revised staff report. So that's the end of my presentation.
Okay, great. Thank you, Travis. Does any of the commission have any quick or not so quick questions or clarifications for Travis?
I do, but I don't know if they're really for Travis or if they're for Travis and the applicant, or if they're just for the applicant. I don't know how you want to do that.
Okay. Well, yeah, I don't know. Maybe we should. I'll leave that up to you. You could do all three if you like.
I'll just go down. I just tried to jot down some stuff as I was reading through the decision. So
okay.
I noticed that they're going to be importing fill to rise above the floodplain, and maybe I didn't see or I didn't read that floodplain map correctly, where the site was within that floodplain map you showed during your presentation. Is the majority of this site 500-year floodplain, like where all the where all the lots are? Is that going to be the mainly 500, or is that going to be the 100-year floodplain?
So let me go back to that map. Actually, I figured this would come up, so I did prepare a little bit of additional information in case we wanted to discuss this. So we're dealing with a couple issues here. The darker area that you see on the left, that's the FEMA firm map, the flood map.
Yes.
The darker area is 100-year floodplain. And what that means is that that denotes, among probably most importantly, where flood insurance is needed. And the lighter gray is 500-year floodplain, and typically flood insurance is not required. It is available, but it's not required. And typically the FEMA or our flood hazard standards, like I said, limits the activities that can occur within a floodplain, and specifically new construction can have parking, storage, and access within the flood plain. And any kind of living space, like the residential living space, needs to be elevated at least 1 foot above the base flood elevation. So you can see on the map on the left, hopefully you can see my arrow.
Yeah, I'm seeing where McCracken Road meets up with it. It's giving me a little better idea.
Yes. And so what I did is I also included a snapshot of the existing condition maps that shows McCracken. So these are kind of the same two intersections. And you can see that on the property, there is a low area just right by McCracken
Yes.
that is theoretically below the floodplain. So under normal circumstances, that area can flood. But what I wanted to point out here is that you can also see that the base flood elevation is supposed to be 37 feet, 38 feet, whereas that property has portions that are 36 feet, 37 feet. So that leads me to believe that there is an elevation issue that the surveyor is going to have to end up dealing with as part of the final plat, because theoretically, this property, like what's identified as 37, elevation 37 by parcel F, that should be above the 38-foot elevation, because we know from the FEMA map that that part of the property is elevated above the base flood elevation. So I think that might be a difference between the 1929 elevation datum and the 1988 elevation datum. So as part of the final engineering, the applicant is going to need to indicate whether there's an inconsistency there between the conversion, between the 29 standard and the 88 standard. And they will also have to deal with FEMA for the placement of fill in the floodplain. And so they've indicated they're going to request a FOMAR for fill and get a map amendment for fill as part of their engineering process. If they do not do that, and that's an option for them, if they do not do that, they can simply elevate the houses. And so you'll, as you drive around town, you see like the new Sequoia Park condominiums, they have tall garages on the ground floor, and those are basically areas that are expected to be flooded during a 100-year flood event. Whereas other neighborhoods, you might have 2 or 3 foot elevations on the foundations, and that there are flow-through areas within the foundation where water will come in and enter the foundation, but not get into the living space. So there's a couple ways for them to address flooding and FEMA compliance.
I guess what I was mainly concerned with was flood storage, right? I saw that some neighbors were concerned, right? And if that backs up and there isn't anywhere for the water to go, it's going to go somewhere. I just, the concern is that the neighboring parcels would see more flooding as a result of the fill within the flood. But I think what I gathered from you saying is that they would have to address all that during the final construction plan review or the engineering. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
So they're going to have the two aspects. One is the floodplain, the other is stormwater, because there is water falling on this property that will no longer be entering into the existing drainage system as well.
Yes, that was the concern with the fill anyway. Okay, I did see that they were proposing infiltration probably for the houses and then the wet ponds for the streets, I'm probably guessing. But I don't know how much infiltration you'll get. Maybe you'll get more if you fill it with better soil, who knows? But okay, so my other question had to do with the split rail fencing for the buffer demarcation. Is that split rail, does that meet our code as far as a barrier? Because I mean, it doesn't keep stuff out. Not like a cyclone fence would, right? I mean.
Yes, it does. Although a cyclone fence may not be much better, especially if you're talking about reed canary grass or blackberry.
Yeah, well, I was talking about people and pets and stuff mainly, right? I mean,
but yes, but the primary idea behind it is we're trying to keep urban development from encroaching into the habitat zone. So whether it's boulders every 15 feet or whether it's a split rail fence or some kind of more solid fence, it's a demarcation standard as opposed to a physical barrier.
Okay. Another question I had is they're proposing a sound wall along Lewis River Road, and I thought I read that it was going to be within the landscape buffer. And so is the planting is going to be behind the wall so that the plantings are on the side of the houses, or the plantings going to be in front of the wall so the plantings are facing the street, because it looks a lot different, right? If you just drive by a giant wall than if you drive by a wall with plantings in front of it.
Yeah, so this is a question that we've had to deal with. There are existing developments like the Misty Place, Misty Meadows subdivision for Misty Drive, where they have a sound wall, but they also have vegetation on the outside and the inside. But the Department of Transportation does not, they've indicated that they do not want vegetation in the right of way. And so the applicant has the option of placing the sound wall either 10 feet back in the buffer or within or on the property line, and having the vegetation on the inside of the fence, which might defeat the purpose, but our code doesn't indicate that it's
Our code
required.
can't force them to do one way or the other. Okay, gotcha. All right. Also, okay, so I see that there's a phasing plan, right? And it just, I've seen sometimes when phasing plans, if the amenities aren't put in or created with the first phase, sometimes, if you kick them down to the end phase and then the end phase never gets built, the amenities never get built. So I was just wondering if the footbridge that I saw on the plan and for the pedestrian connection, all that stuff, if that's going to go in with phase one.
Yeah, and the applicant might want to be able to answer that for you.
Okay. And that's it. That's all I got.
Okay.
Thank you, Travis.
All right, great. Sam or Jason, do you have any questions before we move on?
Sam doesn't have any questions.
No, I'm enjoying this.
All right, good. In that case, let's move on to an applicant presentation if we got it.
Good evening. Scott Taylor. I am the planner for the project with SGA Engineering. Can everyone hear me well?
Yes.
Perfect. So Travis, you have the site plan shown on the screen now, which is great. This is the north half of the project. And so some quick answers to Brian's questions, and I'll go ahead and elaborate on some different pieces and sort of give the full overview of the project. Try and hit all the points we've been discussing and sort of get all the info out there for everybody. So then we can go from there with any other questions and of course public comments and questions. So the footbridge and trail is in phase one. That's on the north side of the project there. And so that will go in with phase one. The reasoning behind the phase one line is because the stormwater facilities and majority of SR 503 frontage was the north half. Same with the Cowlitz PUD station. There's also a Cowlitz PUD right of way or easement that you can see cuts across the development here. It's 30 feet wide, and so that will remain in place and untouched. A new access will go underneath there for the substation, and there's a pump station planned behind the lots on the west side of the station there. So that's where a sewer pump station would be that would pump all the sewer out of this area to the gravity sewer down in Statesman. So I appreciate the questions, Brian. And so the area will have fill imported to raise up above the base flood elevation. There is a difference in datum with our survey versus the 1929 floodplain work and with FEMA's maps. So yes, we are in the middle of that process with the CLOMAR and determining the flood elevations, and a full evaluation is being done by another engineer that we're working with for the floodplain permitting. So that will continue throughout this preliminary process and through final engineering. It actually goes all the way past that, and they do a final as-built approval that shows you are out of the floodplain, and they do the map revision. That's the goal of this project, is to do the map revision so they don't have to deal with the flood insurance that many people do right off the bat. The streets and parking and storage areas can be in the flood plain, like Travis mentioned, so I appreciate that. Some of these streets may be in the flood plain in the end, but all the lots and living spaces will be up out of the flood elevation. The approximate base flood elevation is about 34.5 feet, and we're proposing finished floors of about 36 feet for this development or higher. And so that's that couple feet of difference because of two different survey datums, or where the survey information is taken from. So on the fencing, there will be a split rail fence where in front of open space tracks and backyards could use the split rail fence, but the majority of neighbors and homes built here will want to use a 6-foot cedar fence to block the site of the backyard for private living space. It's pretty traditional that people fence in their backyards. That helps keep people out of the open space tract, and pets as well, at least dogs, out of the open space tract. The idea behind the split rail fence is you want to be able to have open views of your green space, and it's a little more aesthetic than cyclone fencing. Cyclone fencing will be required though around the storm facility. There's one for WashDOT frontage, you can see on the right side of the screen. And the larger storm facility is for the stormwater generated from this site and the public roads and all the roofs. That tract will be public, like Travis mentioned. In the future, after a 2-year period, it would be dedicated to the city. The trail loop is a design concept we wanted to show everybody, but it's not finalized. We don't need to stub the trail to the north end of the property if those neighbors don't wish to have a trail stub there. We could potentially extend the trail to the west and the south and do another little loop. I don't know if there's any other opportunities for connections to the west with any neighbors or roads that aren't impacted by that wetland. So it seems like our trail system, we can manipulate that with final engineering and with working with the neighbors and with city staff. The goal of the open space area, which is approximately 14 acres on this site, is to keep it in a natural state. We want to remove all the blackberries, and so as part of the conservation covenant, there will be a mitigation or maintenance plan that's required for removal of blackberries. And sometimes that's mechanical with mowing, and other times it's with spray, because you have to sometimes kill those and get them out of there so you can get the native trees and plants to grow back. There may be some additional work that we do in the future with WDFW or with the city to do any mitigation type plantings. At this time, we've avoided all critical area direct impacts. We're not proposing to fill any wetlands or fill any streams or put in any new culverts or cross any streams. What we're proposing to do is have a footbridge that could span over the ditch and connect to the north side, so to minimize any impacts there. The trail is proposed as bark. That could be a paved or gravel trail if the city really desired that. But I think the impacts with the open space and the buffers are minimized if we use a bark trail. There will be some other pieces to the mitigation and monitoring that's required out there beyond blackberries. So that'll be worked out between the city and then also WDFW and the applicant. We did have a letter that was prepared by Ecological Land Services, and they have also done work with the applicant and with the original property owners, and have some information about the history of the ditch out there and the agricultural uses. So that's been provided for everyone to read as the letter from the neighbor. And then also the letter from ELS, they talk about the classification of streams versus ditches and the different requirements and the city code. And I think if George Forns or WDFW have any questions tonight, we can go over those. Francis Naglich and ELS are here to answer any questions on that creek versus stream or versus ditch classification question that came up. Other than that, the critical area stuff is pretty straightforward. We're trying to avoid all of it and trying to maximize the open space and stay out of the buffers. We do go into the buffers a little, and there's one other graphic. Maybe you could go back to that, Travis. The color picture that shows the project with the buffers. So the color graphic's nice. It shows a couple areas in the magenta in the northeast corner, and then behind the lots adjacent to the wetlands, there's some small areas where buffer has been reduced, but we've increased the buffer elsewhere on the project. Where the yellow shading is, that is new buffer that's been added to the Robinson Creek. And then there's a dark patch above the wetland, it's in black. That's additional wetland buffer that's been added to the outside of the 80-foot buffer. So this is an additional like 80 feet. So that's called buffer averaging, and that is what we're using really as our primary design tool for critical areas on the project. Stormwater will definitely change on the site. This area will be collected and conveyed to the wet pond that is in the northeast corner. And so the wet pond does always have water in it, and it treats on one side and detains throughout the pond. Then it's released at a very slow rate, below pre-developed rates. So that's the way our stormwater has been designed, to take the rainfall from this whole subdivision within a 100-year storm and collect all of that and hold all of it and release it slowly. So by developing this property, we should hopefully help the drainage patterns in this area improve, if anything. I know there have been challenges in the past with drainage, with the ditch and with beavers and with downstream and upstream challenges. So with this project, we're looking to meet all the city code for drainage requirements and stormwater, same with critical areas. We have a condition of approval that we've tried to elaborate some on the language, and it talks about maintenance of this ditch and allowing this drainage to continue to be free flowing as it affects properties upstream and I'm sure downstream and to the north. The sound wall will be at the edge of the property in the backyards. There'll be a 10-foot landscape buffer that goes on the backyard side for the homes, and they'll all have trees planted every 30 feet. So in 10 years, those trees will be nice screening between the homes and the road, State Route 503. We also have 2 planter strips on 503. There's one between the sidewalk and the street, and we have street trees proposed there. Our goal is to have those placed because it really provides a nice aesthetic for the development and shade for people walking. WashDOT could request that we don't plant any trees there, but we have had success planting trees, at least in Ridgefield, with WashDOT. So we're going to definitely advocate for more landscaping and a nicer, attractive looking subdivision. There's also a 2-foot planter. Well, there's the planter strip for the trees. There's a 6-foot sidewalk, which is detached. And then there's a 2-foot planter behind the sidewalk between the sound wall. So there is an opportunity there for some little shrubs or ground cover if WashDOT's willing to allow that. So we'll work through that process with them. We have already started design conversations with WashDOT and held meetings. Originally, this project was approved with a connection for Statesman to be on the north side of the PUD. And by meeting with WashDOT, they voiced a concern that McCracken and that Statesman connection were too close together. The site distance and the intersection spacing did not meet their 1,000-foot requirement. So we adjusted the project layout, and we now come in adjacent to McCracken. So we'll look to install a left turn lane as you're heading north on 503 to turn into the development. The phasing on the project can change, like Travis mentioned, between final engineering and now, depending on sewer and water connections. Stormwater and grading are a big piece of this. Sometimes a developer does not want to build 150 lots all at one time and put all those into the market. But right now the market's really aggressive, and so they may choose to build all of this at one time. But they also may choose to phase the construction. The way it's shown now, all of 503 frontage improvements would be built with phase 1 and the connection to the kids' school. There'll be a new sidewalk there. There's also a second sidewalk connection that comes out of the private road to the north, where Statesman Drive used to come through. That connection is for emergency vehicles and fire to come through. There'll be a gate that fire has a key to. And then on the side of the gate, there'll be a sidewalk connection for pedestrians to use. Those 4 homes will use a private road that's 20 feet wide to access their lots. I think that answered majority of those questions and sort of got majority of the discussion started on the project. We have one other connection to the kids' school at the southeast corner, right through the corner of the development, and it connects where the bus drop-off is, I believe. So that is our third sort of connection out to the east and south and to the kids' school. So maybe if we did phase 1, how it shows here, we may have a temporary connection that we put through for the kids if phase 2 isn't built. Things like that. Same with utilities and like any temporary turnarounds or emergency vehicle access. All those details will be worked out with final engineering and the review with public works and city staff. So those things aren't set in stone at this point, but I think everything's looking really good. The streets are 28 feet wide and 32 feet wide through this project. So there will be parking on one side. They're not restricted to no parking. They do not allow parking on both sides because they're not over 32 feet wide. But as you can see, majority of the roads have driveways that front on them. So there's one parking space usually in front of or between those driveways for each residence. The plan is for 2-car driveways and 2-car garages on all buildings in the project. Some, of course, could be 3-car garages on the larger lots, but as a minimum, it's going to be 4 parking spaces per unit. I think we talked majority about the layout and how we've sort of come to this preliminary plat. The sound wall is a SEPA condition because we wanted to try and help with the noise of 503 in the subdivision. There's no other fence line encroachments or adverse possession claims or any title concerns with this property. There are 3 legal tax lots, and the Cowlitz GIS shows 10 different tax parcels. This happens a lot when people have different parcelization they do for tax reasons. But as far as recognized legal lots, there are 3 legal lots. We're going to boundary line adjust one of the lots to the northeast corner of the project where the shoreline jurisdiction is located and no development is proposed. The second lot, we could boundary line adjust around the entire critical areas tract, and that tract could then be a separate piece of property that could either be dedicated to the city or held by the HOA. And then the third piece of property is all of the development itself, all of the lots and the pump station, the roads, everything to the extent of the boundary. And no street lighting is required on 503 is one other unique item that WashDOT brought up. They do not require that. Didn't sound like they were interested in that. But we are going to be working with the city and WashDOT to make sure the design we come up with satisfies both groups. We will have pedestrian connection with sidewalks, and I don't know if bike lanes will start there or may start further to the south, but all these coordinating pieces will be dealt with working through the engineering plans with the city. But yes, we are proposing some new connections to the kids' school, and I think that's about everything I wanted to cover from the get-go. Are there any immediate questions? Do we want to just go straight to questions, Travis, with the commission?
Thanks, Scott. This is Tal Jensen. Yeah, I thank you so much for your presentation. Yeah, I think if we've got any questions from the commission for you, then we should jump into those.
So I noticed, and maybe I didn't understand it fully when I read it, but I'm used to having the sewer capacity be known at the preliminary approval, and it looks like there was still some questions on whether there was sewage capacity or that it would impact other properties. Maybe you can explain that to me.
Yeah. So some feedback on the sewer. Originally, they were looking at maybe pump stations 6 and 7, which are downstream from this project, being evaluated to make sure there's capacity. But recently, some other developments taken place in the city, and we were able to find records on pump station 6 being updated and some larger pumps being installed with some development in the last couple of years. And so pump station 7 is downstream from this project. And so the sewer from this pump station and the gravity main and Statesman's Drive will drain to that pump station 7. So that has been evaluated recently, but we'll have some updated evaluation information by Public Works. They'll do run times and drawdowns and tests to make sure it's functioning how it's been designed and that there is capacity. It's believed that there is capacity. The main concern or the thing to be safe about is make sure it's operating how it was designed. So the pumps in there are pumping so many gallons per minute and the cycles are running how they're supposed to. So we're going to be working with, I believe it's Gray and Osborne for final engineering review. And I believe they also did some of the pump station design in your guys' city and have good records of that stuff. So the way it's conditioned now, that yes, that should be coordinated through our engineering efforts and confirm that the capacity is there and things are operating how they're supposed to. But from all accounts, it's sounding like the capacity should be good as long as pump station 7 is operating how it's supposed to.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Scott.
Yep.
Jason or Sam, do you have any questions for Scott?
Sam doesn't know. Thank you.
Not exactly, but very. This is very comprehensive, and the fact that there was critical areas were avoided, and every effort was made to avoid it speaks volumes, and very comprehensive, and yeah, I gotta say I appreciate it.
All right, great. I think we'll probably end up having some more questions as we get into discussion. I've got a couple right now. I'm curious what I see your detention ponds. I'm curious to hear more about your stormwater management.
Yeah. One more piece that Brian mentioned earlier, excuse me, and I forgot to mention or clarify is he mentioned infiltration. And infiltration is being used on some of the lots for roof runoff, which is clean stormwater. It's not where cars drive. And so that can be infiltrated directly into the ground. So that really helps to not have, a giant storm facility, which we already do have a very large one, but this is a very large development. Wet ponds are 2 big cells of stormwater, and there's a big rock window in the middle. So you might have recognized some other ones around town, or it's a common type of stormwater. And so the stormwater flows in and is treated on one side and it's detained on the other, and then it will be released to the north outside of the creek area, closer to the ditch. And like I mentioned before, it's released at a very low rate, which is below pre-developed rates for this entire basin. So the stormwater has been designed sort of to treat this whole basin. WashDOT's facility is separate. It is a little wet pond as well, and that would be in public right-of-way. That tract or that right-of-way area will be donated to WashDOT. The infiltration would be in the backyards, I believe, for a lot of the roofs, and so there'll be private stormwater infiltration systems. All the other runoff will be sort of traditional catch basins that collect it in the road, and they'll be piped to the storm facility. So not a lot of surface flow will go into that storm facility. Most everything's going to be collected in catch basins and underground and going in there. Do you have other questions on stormwater?
Do you know what, you mentioned some of the lots will have infiltration. Do you know, can you tell us how many or a proportion?
I don't actually know right offhand. I'd have to look at the plan that my engineers worked on. I know it was discussed, and it's feasible. Its feasibility can be driven by groundwater. So if groundwater comes up too high, then you don't want to look to use infiltration. You'd rather convey it and just do a little bit bigger stormwater facility. The way it's going to be in the blocks of units, I think they're sort of back to back. So a rear yard system. And then if that rear system for infiltration ever did overflow, it's designed so it would overflow into the storm system for the streets and not into people's homes or off site. The real thing to take away from all of this is that no additional stormwater will flow off site from this project. If anything, the volumes of stormwater will be reduced because it's being collected and treated and held and then slowly released. So that's one important thing to take away from this big development.
Okay, great. I guess another question I had, I think I know the answer. I just want to make sure. Do you have any? Are any of these lots rear loaded, or are they all Looks like they've all got front-loaded garages. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah, we did not propose any alleys or rear-loaded product in this. It is allowed in the PURD, and so is attached townhomes, which we did not propose. And there's also multifamily that could even be proposed and much higher densities. So we wanted to keep it a single-family detached subdivision. And we varied the lot sizes so we can hopefully get some more affordable housing in here, but then also have some nice larger greenbelt lots and a variety of sizes really for people to purchase new home ownership opportunities. So no rear loaded product though.
Okay. All right. I think that does it for me right now. Any other commissioners before we move on to public comment?
I just wanted to say I do give the applicant kudos for putting their stormwater system, close to the wetlands as far as reducing their buffer. To put the stormwater system there instead of the homes, something so low impact, is very beneficial and maybe not as profitable as another option. So I appreciate that.
Okay, great. Thank you, Scott. And yeah, I appreciate what you're trying to do in protecting the, keeping those open spaces and wetlands. That is appreciated. Let's see, one moment. I just gotta find my notes here. So let's see. Do we normally does staff have anything to add after that presentation, or can we move on to public testimony? No. Okay. So let's see. I'm gonna open public testimony then. I'm not sure how many folks we have who want to give testimony. Those of you who are on a computer, and want to give testimony, we drop a note in the chat window just so we have an idea? I see we've got 30 people in the meeting. So just trying to get an idea of how many folks want to speak just for organizational purposes.
I'm on a phone call. I don't know if you guys can hear me, but I have a couple questions.
Okay, one second. Let me, what is your name?
My name is Erica Rip.
Erica, okay, great. I just want to, just trying to take a quick tally of folks. All right, it doesn't look like there's too many, so I would ask you to be brief and concise if you're able, but I don't think we need to do a time limit at this point. If I have second thoughts about that, I might have to cut you off, but I don't think that should be a problem. So staff, did you have sorry, I'm kind of flubbing this. Did you have a plan for taking public comment, or should I just try to do one at a time here?
You were doing it how I envisioned it would happen.
Okay, great. Okay, so Erica, since I heard from you first, we will give you the floor. And Darcy, I want to let you know I saw you as well, so we'll hear from you after Erica. And can I remind you to state your name again and your address in the city before you give testimony, please? So you're up, Erica.
Oh, sorry. My name is Erica Rip. I'm going to keep my address private for personal reasons, but I am neighboring this development. And I give kudos to you guys. Your presentation this time was excellent and definitely a lot more informational than what we got on December 5th. I do have questions in regards to, I know you mentioned turn lanes and some traffic impacts. Are you guys requesting a speed change when I think it hits like 50 right there with 150 new homes going in? Are you guys going to request a speed change near the school right there?
Would you guys like to do all questions and then I can go back and sort of answer all of them, or would you like me to answer as they go? I don't mind.
No, I think probably all at once sounds good, just to keep things kind of organized. And
I'll take
make
notes. I'll be ready.
Okay. All right, fantastic.
Thanks.
Erica, did you have any other questions or comments before we move on? Or was that
my last question is, well, I have two more questions. Gun Club is going to be one of your main secondary roads for these new homes, and I know you mentioned how much parking you're going to allow for the homes, but my concern is Gun Club is in pretty rough shape already. Do you guys have improvements planned as the city? I don't know if this is so much for the developer because it's not part of their project, but does the city have plans for sidewalks on Gun Club Road at all? And then my other question is probably for the city again. You mentioned that the developer is going to pay impact fees based off of 2019 statistics that I researched. It shows about $9,000 the city collects per home. With my math, that's about 150 homes, $9,000 per home to the city. It's about $1.3 million. And I was just wondering, this kind of connects with the Gun Club road improvement question. I am wondering where that money is going to be dedicated to road improvements. I know Larch Street, Salmon Street, and Lewis River currently don't have crosswalks for our children. It's a huge concern for me. Last year, we had a little guy get hit on a bike on Salmon Street. There's no painted, no parking yellow lines. There is staff members out at the school helping these children, but this is after hours, and it is a concern that there's no improvements I'm seeing be done around the school. And again, this is not the developer's problem, so this is probably more for the city, but with that 1.3 million, I'm hoping that the city will dedicate improvements on sidewalks and crosswalks. And that's my last question.
Okay, thank you so much, Erica. And I think, yeah, we'll see if staff has anything to say about that. You're right that is perhaps a bigger issue outside of this development, but I agree that those are very important regardless. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let's move on to Darcy. Would you tell us your name and your address?
Hello, yeah, I'm Darcy Billingsley. I'm a county resident, and I'd like to ask about the fact that our community is unique regarding flood hazards, being located below 3 reservoirs. So I didn't hear anything regarding in the case of a catastrophic dam failure, that would be a different type of a flood than what you've been discussing, the 100-year floodplain and the 500-year floodplain. So is that just a non-issue with these plans that just is not considered? So that was my one question. Second question, also unique to our community, is Highway 503 is the sole egress for up to 15,000 people during the summertime up the way of up to Cougar, in Ariel and Cougar. So I noticed that the traffic plan or study was done in March of 2018. And that doesn't take into consideration the seasonal traffic of all the boaters and vacationers, especially at that time of year when it could be a tinderbox, and we residents up there could be, in a fire trap if traffic was bottlenecked down here by a subdivision. Oh, and thirdly, regarding traffic, I hear you're counting on the school students to walk to school from this subdivision, but as a person who has a student at the school, I can observe the behavior of most families, and they do hop in their car and take the kids to school, even if it's only a couple of blocks. So the way that our school is so congested now, I would like to see somebody take another look at that as well and make sure that the traffic can be handled for the huge volume of students that I would expect to be a result of 150 home subdivision. And those are my questions.
Thank you, Darcy. I appreciate it. I'll just touch on a couple of those quickly, and staff may have some input as well. The dam issue, while that may certainly be a huge concern, I don't know that there's really anything anybody in Woodland could do about it. Catastrophic failure, I think. Short of, I'm not really sure, enormous levies. Travis, go ahead.
I can tell you that the Emergency Operations Center, or Cowlitz County and Clark County, both have an emergency plan that they've prepared in cooperation with the dam operator. And so there are emergency plans in place, and preparations are made for those. The question of whether or not they're adequate, I'm not qualified to judge that, but of course, is anybody available, or is anybody adequately prepared for an emergency is a fundamental question I think we all have to deal with. So that I do know the answer to. You can contact both Cowlitz County and Clark County to discuss that issue if you have a concern.
Okay, and as far as traffic from upriver, right or wrong, a developer's only responsible for their additional impact. So I'm not sure there's much to do on that particular scale. Travis, does that?
Yeah, so I can go back and answer that because Erica also had questions. I did point out that in addition to frontage improvements on State Route 503, the applicant is required to pay impact fees, and how the city spends those impact fees, whether they're park, fire, school, or transportation, is they need to be spent on growth related capital improvement projects or equipment. They cannot be used for maintenance and operations. So for example, the school district will collect, I believe it's $5,400 per unit. And that money goes to the school district for them to spend it on capital improvements like new schools, or equipment like new buses or technology for the schools that are related to growth impacts. They cannot use that money on maintenance and operations like paying staff and paying teachers. That's what the tax revenue and the property tax levies are for, maintenance and operations. So the city is limited on what it can spend that money on because it has to be growth related. The issue about 503 is something that we are trying to wrestle with. We are doing a study of exit 21, and we're taking a look at the amount of traffic that passes through the city to get to the county. And this is a sore political topic for the city of Woodland because we are asked to maintain and fix these intersections and these roads. And so everybody upriver doesn't have to contribute to the city road fund or pay taxes to the city to make those improvements and to fix those issues. And so we are trying to work with Cowlitz County to get them to prioritize spending on projects in the city of Woodland and around the city of Woodland that are affected by county traffic. And so we are working to address that. but we recognize that that is a problem that we have not got a handle on. I also want to point out that the traffic counts, they are as good as we could get, but they are COVID-19 numbers, and they all are also seasonal numbers. So we recognize that they are the best information that we have at this point, and the city needs to do a better job at modeling and measuring its transportation.
Okay, great. Thank you, Travis. I want to make sure, before I move on, that everybody who wants to give public comment has had a chance to. So if you're on a computer, put a note in the chat window or unmute yourself and say a word so we know.
I guess I have a follow-up question. This is Erica Rip. I think you answered somewhat in regards to the $1.3 million that you guys are going to get a loan for impact fees, and the school would get $5,400 per unit. I guess I don't understand why the city wouldn't. You guys paved Beechwood Street, and I know that there's city grants. What prioritized Beechwood Street versus Gun Club? Again, we're going to add 150 new homes. They got sidewalks, and those homes are much older, so I know new developments are required to do sidewalks. But Beechwood, you were able to do a grant. Why is Gun Club being ignored, and it's the main road to our schools? There's several hundreds of kids that live off Gun Club, that walk, bike. There's no crosswalk to Northwork Elementary at all. A child got hit there. How is this still being ignored? We have no sidewalks. We have no crosswalks. You guys are getting $1.3 million. The school is getting $5,400 per unit. I would like to see a plan for our children and the children that we're going to add in this development. Where is this plan?
Sure, Erica. So,
yeah,
sorry, tell me, mind if I address that?
Yeah, please.
So I could have done a better job answering that question. So because it has to be earmarked for growth, so I can give you some great examples. Every time a contractor applies to build a house, they will pay approximately $1,400 of fire impact fees. And those fire impact fees go to pay off the new fire station or the debt that the city incurred to buy the property that the fire station now lives on. So those are growth related costs because the city had to build a new station. For the school district, for example, they can use it on portables in a temporary manner, or they can be saving it for, say, a new elementary school, or they could use it to pay off existing debt on the high school. So there's a couple ways that they can spend it, but that is actually determined by the school district as part of their capital facilities plan. So if you get on the school district site, you can see how much debt they're carrying on each of their facilities and how they have earmarked their money. So each one of those homes, theoretically, it's going for various different projects. That's allocated by the school board. The park impact fees go into a fund, and they are currently looking at a splash pad to be added to Horseshoe Lake Park. So that money is kind of being socked away so that they have enough money to do a matching grant. And the roads, which is probably the most important one that people worry about, and that is the city develops what's called the Transportation Improvement Program, the TIP. And we essentially have this list of, 25 years worth of projects that need to be done. And then we look at how much money we have allocated for each year. And I want to say last year it was like $90,000. And so we use the transportation improvement or the transportation impact fees, which are $838 per new residents. And we try and maximize that by using it in some cases as grant matching dollars. And the city has been saving a lot of its impact fees for a grant that would extend a sidewalk from the roundabout at Westcott and State Route 503 along the west or the north side, depending on what you want to call that, of State Route 503 all the way up to the school. So ideally, the city has been socking its nickels and dimes away to do a grant that will install a sidewalk along 503 all the way. The city council review that transportation improvement program, or the TIP, every year, and they adopt a spending priority based upon how much money they have. They could decide to raid that savings fund and take it out of the sidewalk and instead allocate it to sidewalks along Gun Club Road or another project somewhere else in the city. But they theoretically try to keep to a steady, predictable rate of how they're going to do the transportation improvements over the next 6 years based upon following that tip. Now, Beechwood might be another example where they used road funds instead of the transportation impact fees to pay for, it might have been a $6,000 sidewalk project, and they just happened to have $6,000, whereas $6,000 won't actually do anything because they've filled all their potholes for the year. So basically, they have a small amount of money that they have to prioritize as to what they can get done. And so it's basically a constant juggling effort based upon the council's priority in the tip.
So that does answer somewhat, but I guess for the city, I don't know if the council's on here, but is there a plan for sidewalks on Gun Club that is a main road to hundreds of children's elementary school? And the speed change, is there going to be a requested speed change for all those homes and turn lanes going in right next to the school sharing property? And again, for the city, until I turn blue in the face, is there a plan to finish sidewalks on Gun Club?
So I will have to, maybe if we take a break, Mr. Chairman, I will look and see if Gun Club is on the tip, but I currently do not believe it's on the tip. If it is, it is not on the funded project list on the tip.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds reasonable. I don't think we'll take a break at this moment, but I think before the commission discusses things, we will. So we should have a chance then. And I do, Erica, I do really appreciate your concern about this. I think it's again, I think it's a really important issue, and I think that it is very much tied in with the way development happens and impact fees and taxes in the city. So it's not unrelated to our hearing tonight, but it is getting a bit far afield from what we're able to consider for a recommendation, just from a organizational and legal point of view, unfortunately. Which is not to diminish the importance of that at all. I'm right there with you. I think that's very important.
Well, no, that's totally fine. I'll look forward to touching base with the city. It sounds like maybe there's some future meetings that we'll need to discuss issues that don't belong with this developer.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and yeah, I encourage you to definitely talk to city council and other folks in the city, and also get your concerned neighbors too as well. Each voice is important, but definitely more together, I think we'll have more impact. So again, thanks for speaking up. Do we have anybody else? Any more public comment?
I have a comment.
Okay, who's this?
This is Christine Stelzer, and I'm over towards the adjacent property where Statesman comes, where the development would come out towards Statesman. My question is, if I understood it correctly, the homes are going to be built up like 36 inches at least above, to be above the floodplain. Is that correct?
That was my understanding as well, yeah.
Okay, because I don't think my house, which is right next door, is built at that level. My air conditioner's at that level, but my home is not at that level. So I guess my question is how is the runoff contained in that area for the 3 of our homes that are right along there? Because our homes will be lower than the newer homes that are built. And those lots, the lots that are right behind us are pretty small, long and narrow lots. So there's not a lot of space for water to drain on those lots.
So that seems like an important question. My understanding of the stormwater code is that they are not. I don't believe they can shed stormwater onto adjacent properties. I think it has to all remain on the property or go into the public right away.
I think that question relates somewhat to the question I had earlier about the flood storage. And that's going to have to be addressed by their engineers during the next phase of the process, was my understanding.
Okay.
Yeah.
The other question I have is about lot, I believe it's lot 35 on the map. There's a great big square in the middle of that lot towards the back. Can you tell me what that is? It's over in the corner, just as you're, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lots around the corner from Statesman to the north.
I actually had that same question, but I had forgotten to write that down. It looks like a building envelope almost.
Yeah.
Where is this?
Yes, that was a 40-foot by 40-foot conceptual building pad, just to show what a house would look like, where a house would sit on that lot. That's all that was.
Oh, okay.
That was an easy one.
Well, I wondered because there's, I guess those are driveways that are in the little teeny squares. I mean, driveways.
Yes, those are 20-foot by 20-foot driveways, so a 2-car driveway.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Christy. I appreciate that. I see a message from Christy Tsu about the school district. Did you, Christy, if you're listening, did you mean a chance for the school district to speak for the hearing?
No, I was just wondering if anyone in the group knew if there was still an opening for the school district. I could have sworn I seen that there was one a while back.
An opening of what nature?
For the school board.
Planning.
Like Erica might want to be, more involved, with the community in the school.
Okay. All right. Good point. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Great. All right. So, is there anyone else? Seems like folks are trickling in that want to speak, and I think the more the merrier. So, now is kind of your one chance to give your input, at least at this stage of the project. Okay.
Hey, I could go.
Who is this? This is Christy?
No. Hi, this is Deanna Holland. I'm here as an actual citizen, not a council member.
All right.
Because I live by this. where this is proposed. So I live off of Slaughterhouse Corner in the Cedar Evergreen Fir area. And so for me personally, just to leave my house in the morning with the intermediate school, it's like a good 20 vehicles before I can get out onto Lewis River Road. So the thought of another 150 vehicles pulling out onto Lewis River Road for me to try and leave my house at any time is kind of scary. Just for the simple fact that, like, I've lived here for 48 years. This house has been here for 48 years, and the amount of accidents and stuff that happen on this corner because nobody knows how to slow down. Adding 150 extra drivers kind of freaks me out. We've actually had people wreck and hit our fence. Anyway, so that's kind of my concern, is the amount of traffic, just because I live here. A lot of the other things, I think people would be really, it would behoove the listeners and the people participating to actually take a look at Monday's council agenda, because the budget is in there. So a lot of the things you guys are asking about are in the budget or not in the budget. So that was me switching my hat to answer to be a council member for a second. So but that would be very helpful to a lot of people. And but yeah, this and thank you, Erica, for posting on Facebook, because I didn't know about this development until you posted about it. So that's about all I have to say.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. There might be a little bit of mixing up jurisdictions here, but that seems fine. I will, just while you're here, put in a pitch for better street connectivity that would alleviate a lot of traffic issues. But thank you. Are there anyone else? Any more public comments?
This kind of goes along with Christy. This is Erica again. You guys are never going to get rid of me. Sorry. The speed limit change. I don't know if that was ever answered. The speed limit change near the school. It goes from 35 to 50. Does anybody have any answer for that?
So I believe, my understanding is that the speed limit changes at city limits, yes? Is that?
It's pretty close to your, I don't know who's speaking, if this is the developer or Travis, but it's pretty close to that bed and breakfast. I mean, you guys are kind of indicating you're going to add 2 turn lanes right there. And I'm just wondering if you guys are considering or even have thought about that traffic and slowing down, adding crosswalks like in the school, and if you're going to consider a speed limit change right there.
So the Department of Transportation is the one that would decide the speed limit because it is a state highway. The applicant and the city can request DOT to look at that, but it's entirely within the state's purview as to what the speed limit is on the highway.
Okay, can you guys request to do that while we're at it?
Increase it or decrease it?
Decrease it for your turn lane.
Sure, so I will put that in an email to the Department of Transportation contacts that I deal with. But I also have to point out that the engineers being engineers, they will plug it into a computer model and determine whether a speed change makes sense and whether it meets engineering warrants and safety standards. So even though it might intuitively feel right, if the engineer says it works, that's entirely up to the Department of Transportation.
Well, and that's perfect. If they have a system, let's use it and let's see if it requires it or not.
All right, great. Thanks once again. Let's, unless, we have one last chance for public comment, and then I'll give Scott and a chance to reply to that as the questions. All right. So, sorry, bit flustered here. But are there any more public comments? Okay. All right. Travis, did you have anything to? Travis or Melissa, do you have anything to add to respond to those questions? I think you addressed most of them at this point. No. Okay. In that case, Scott, applicant, did you want to say a couple more things?
Sure. Thank you. Travis, if you could go up to the next slide with the north side of the project shown. So what I currently saw out on site is a speed limit change where you sort of leave the city limits. It is not at the north edge of the urban growth boundary, but it is the city limits currently. There's a line that goes across the road. It's a thick dashed line that if you can see that, that's where the edge of the city limit sort of cuts across and goes from the east side to the west side. And so that's the technical sort of city limits. The speed limit change is north of that where there's a culvert. And so it's actually towards the very north end of this map, sort of where the project has a big jog in it. That's right where the speed limit goes 50 miles an hour to the north and 35 miles an hour to the south. So it changes to 35, but I'm sure people are traveling quicker than that as they're coming into town. My thought is maybe we could talk with the school, see if they're interested in a 20-mile-per-hour flashing sign that goes on during school hours. Then people would see that and slow down. You know, some kind of signage like that would be placed hundreds of feet, you know, ahead of that, which would be close to our entrance probably. And, you know, we'd be willing to entertain, you know, working with WashDOT and the kids' school and trying to coordinate that effort. Like Travis mentioned, you know, WashDOT does set those standards, and this is a state route. So they're going to want to see traffic flowing quickly and large volumes of traffic. So I don't know if we'll ever get it to go lower than 35 miles an hour, but I think they could make provisions for school flashing students, you know, when present, 20 miles an hour speed limit flashing signs. And so that's something that we could propose to WashDOT next time we talk with them. Travis can do his email to WashDOT and ask, you know, if there's any opportunity for slower school speeds and try and increase the safety in front of the kids' school there. So that's one idea. To answer some of the other questions, by connecting the road through from Statesman out to 503, hopefully that should take a little bit of traffic off of Gun Club Road and have people that would almost cut through this area to get out to 503 quicker. It might not take much traffic off, but it is another opportunity for traffic to come out to 503. Typically people want to get on the largest classification road as quick as they can with higher speed limits or quicker travel times to get out to the freeway off to work. The traffic study we had done was by Charbonneau Engineering, and it was completed in November of 2020. I think they did some counts in September and October, and they may have used some other historical counts or information that they got from other traffic engineers from WashDOT or the city and private engineers. So a 2018 date that you guys saw on a traffic study may have just been some past traffic counts that they're allowed to use for a couple years. It is definitely a seasonal road. WashDOT knows that. That's why they want to keep as much traffic sort of flowing as they can there. They have extra wide shoulders and the center turn lane, really wide right of way. So I think if there are incidents, they have enough right of way. They try and keep people moving around any accidents. The goal is to always have less accidents for sure. And we're in support of that. I'm always trying to promote additional stop signs or school slow speed limit signs. Speed bumps if they're warranted. Unfortunately, I don't think we'll ever get speed bumps on 503, but you know, any other kind of signage, you know, safety signage for letting people know there's a school ahead. So we can definitely help coordinate some of that and be an advocate for that with you guys. Sounds like you need to talk to the city council and put some of these things in front of them. Maybe try and get Gun Club Road on a traffic improvement plan for the future. If it is on the plan, maybe try and get it funded quicker or moved up the list. So they do have a priority. They have a list of what happens when, and hopefully you guys could try and get some traction there. I know Gun Club Road has sidewalk on one side for part of it and not the other. It goes back and forth, and then it becomes very rural in nature as you go to the north of the city limits. So that's an off-site issue that we're not going to be contributing any additional traffic to or pedestrians, but something that hopefully you guys can work with city council on and have that, you know, be an item that gets worked on with some of these improvement fees. I think Travis answered most of the questions when it came to impact fees. I appreciate that. And talked about speed change and impact fees. Crosswalks, you know, we could always propose a crosswalk at our main road at McCracken. And so it'd be a little safer, you know, for pedestrians there. If the city would like to see that, you know, we could work with them in engineering. I don't think any other crosswalks in the development are really warranted, but it sounds like maybe at Salmon Street and some other streets in the neighborhoods, you guys could push for that. We will be coordinating with this kid's school. We do have a new sidewalk that comes down 503 and goes into the school property, but the school does not have a sidewalk that connects to 503. So we'll need to coordinate with them to get a sidewalk by their storm facility and come down to 503. And it looks like they'd probably want a crosswalk at their main entrance that shows kids walking across that driveway and promotes more safety. So that'll be part of the coordinating efforts that we're going to do with the kids' school and the sidewalk connection and 2 sidewalk connections. You know, we're not allowed to increase any drainage off site. And so none of the roads will be able to drain to the west down Statesman and affect any of the neighbors. We'll have catch basins at the west end of Statesman Drive, and stormwater will be collected, and the same with the roofs and lots. So all that would then collect and get flowed back to our storm facility. So the goal is to really not increase any off-site flows. If anything, it should help maybe if any of these areas adjacent to the neighbors are higher right now and water is flowing freely off of there, then where we put in roads or lots, then that water would be collected and conveyed to the north. So hopefully that helps with some of the neighbors. They do definitely have lower elevations as you go to the west, and they have annual drainage challenges in the streets and some people's backyards and side yards. And as Travis mentioned before, this is a 100-year floodplain area where previous developments didn't raise their entire site. They raised up just the finished floors of homes. So unfortunately, people do have water in their backyards or crawl spaces and challenges that come with building in a floodplain. So the goal of this project was to try and improve the development drainage in this area and future home sites, so they're not going to deal with drainage issues or flooding, but not to increase any flooding off-site. If anything, improve drainage off-site because of the way things are set up on this property with the drainages. I hope we've answered all the questions this evening. I know there might be 1 or 2 more, and I don't mind answering any more. I think everything else has been discussed. I'm trying to cover all my notes here for you guys. I think that is it. I thank you guys very much for your time and efforts for staff, and I'm here for other questions. Thank you.
All right, thanks a lot, Scott. And yeah, I think, you know, you highlight an issue that the Department of Transportation's goals are sometimes at odds with the city goals and the residents. And, you know, moving as many people as possible, as quickly as possible, doesn't necessarily make for a nice or safe place to live. And that is something that I think the Department of Transportation is slowly coming around on, but not nearly quick enough. So I would, you know, encourage everybody, as much energy as you can muster for it, to you know, talk to everybody from the city and on up to the state about that sort of thing, because it's really important and it really impacts our quality of life. At this point, I'm gonna close public testimony, and I think we'll have a little bit to talk about. It's getting kind of late, but I think we should take a quick break, give everyone a chance to have a break. So how about we come back here in 5 minutes? So that would be 8:53. Does that sound all right?
Yep.
Okay. All right. See you soon. Looks much better, Travis. All right. We're missing at least one commissioner, so I guess I'll wait a little bit longer. Before you get started, I can't remember what it was. It must have been Saturday Night Live or something, but there was somebody kept protesting that it was the sofa making the noise. and I don't know if you guys can hear this. Can hear this chair making silly noises as I squirm around in it, but I swear it was the chair.
Okay.
That sounds like somebody trying to talk to us. It doesn't look like. All right, we're still missing a couple commissioners. Past that very hard and sacred deadline I set.
I'm here to tell, unless in case you're waiting for
All
me.
right, cool. All right, we're just missing one. Oh, Sam's here too. I just didn't see him in the picture. All right, great. Let's get back to it then. Commissioners, if we could try a free-for-all, and if that makes a mess, then I'll call on you one at a time. But what have you got to say?
I asked a lot of my questions earlier, and it sounds like a lot of the stuff's going to be, figured out on the next step of review with the engineering. I don't have any critical questions that have remained unanswered at this point.
Okay, great. Sam, Jason?
Likewise, I concur. Any other questions that remain, we'd have to kind of go further along in the process, but all my questions were pretty much answered.
Okay. Great. Sam?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay, well, all right, then you leave me no choice but to bring things up. Just so we don't look like we're rubber stamping this. I was looking at our PERD code and how many points it requires and how many points that the project has been assigned here, and it just doesn't quite add up to me. And I got, one issue might be quibbling, but a couple others I think I would like to have addressed, and that's, let's see, we're giving 3 points for traditional neighborhood design. And as I read the code, traditional neighborhood design requires at least 50% alley access. And that's in our PERD code, so it's a little dry, but it is in there. So I don't think we can just kind of scramble past it. And then for stormwater, we're also giving 7 points for low impact development. And I think that, excuse me, I think the plan has, it's a fine stormwater plan. I think it will address stormwater adequately and do a good job. And, like Scott said, probably even improve the situation for folks in the vicinity. But again, I don't think it, at least as I understand low impact development best management practices, wet ponds are not that. So I'm a little fuzzy there. And then we're also giving them points for the internal circulation. And this one is just maybe because the code's pretty clumsy. It's not written real well, but they get points both for internal circulation and for, let's see, internal circulation with exterior connectivity. And it seems like it should be one or the other of those and not both. And I hate to quibble about these things because I think, they've made a great effort to, I don't know, get points in our PERD checklist. I think that's really important. It's code, and there are some good things in there, but I think at least the traditional development and the stormwater LID, that if those points aren't really deserved, that sits below the requirement. Sort of outside the PERD, one concern I've got, and this is, I'm loath to bring it up because it's contrary to everything that I want in our city, but it is in our code, and this is probably more of a clarification. I don't know about this one, but I believe, it mentions again in the PERD code that where on-street parking is allowed, an additional off-street spot is required, and I was trying to, and I didn't find out before we got going, but I think we require 2 off-street spots generally. So would that then mean that if they don't have parking on one side of the street, they have to have 3? I mean, that sounds absurd to me and ridiculous, and they certainly shouldn't be required to have 3 off-street spots. But the way I read it, our code might say that.
So
my concern, and I think all the concerns about traffic and street and safety, those are really important. I guess my other issues are, I think we're potentially putting density in the wrong part of the city, and I think a sound wall is obnoxious and horrible, but I don't think those are objections that I can point to anything in the code. Those are just kind of personal issues that I think affect the city negatively, but those are not necessarily the developer's responsibility. So, Ryan, you were going to say something?
Well, I was trying to look up the PERD code while you were talking about it. In the staff report, it doesn't go into how staff has justified that it meets the specific PERD requirements. But I was just going to go down the list of the ones you were wondering about. As far as the stormwater LID, I'm not a stormwater expert and I don't play one on TV, but I think if you propose infiltration, that's considered low impact development. I mean, maybe that's one of the reasons they qualified for that. I'm just throwing it out there. The applicant probably could, or staff would probably be better to answer that. But traditional neighborhood design, I don't know what that is. I was trying to look that up. I know they have a little, they have like what, 4 points leeway, right? I mean, if you're making, if you're taking the position that they don't have enough PERD points to qualify as the PERD development, then we'd have to look at that line item by line item, right?
Yeah, and so yeah, it totally wouldn't be an issue, but so it's 3 points for the traditional development, and I can give you the section in the code if you want that. And then stormwater is 7. So it's so great. All right, it is 17-16-090.
For the traditional neighborhood is 17?
Yeah.
Okay.
And like the real crux of it is M in that section, which is that at least 50% of the homes shall have alleys for vehicular access.
Okay, I 1708. What was the final 3 numbers? I'm sorry.
It was 17.16.090.
16090. Okay. All right, I'm with you now.
And the rest of it, like I look at the design and I see, I just look at the layout and I don't really think traditional design, but that's again more because what I expect is sort of rectilinear, much more connectivity.
The front porch.
Yeah, I like that. That's great, and that's I assume that that's going to be in the design. But just as far as this plan view, again, that's not in our code, but I would expect a lot more. I guess more connection and less sort of closed loop.
All provisions are met, so it has to meet all A through M there. Yeah. Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I guess I agree with you there. Is that the only one that you're concerned with? Was the LID? That's the 7, right?
I'm trying to find the definition of LID, and the stormwater manual is pretty squishy on it, unfortunately. There's a little bit about it. I can tell you what I found, and it says, so LID BMPs refer to BMPs that are installed for the purpose of mimicking the pre-disturbance hydrologic processes of infiltration, filtration, storage, evaporation, transpiration. They are defined as distributed stormwater management practices integrated into a project design that emphasize pre-disturbance hydrologic processes of infiltration, filtration, storage, evaporation, and transportation. They provide a combination of runoff treatment and or flow control benefits that are defined as their own type of BMP due to the additional hydrologic benefits they provide. Some of these additional benefits are difficult to model at an individual site level, but have been demonstrated to have a significant cumulative impact when distributed across large areas. So that's not telling you a lot, but sorry, I thought they actually listed some examples.
The first thing it lists is infiltration, right? So also, again, I'm not an engineer, so I might just be exposing my ignorance by talking about this, but there is some treatment going on in their storm tract A, like it's treated or cleaned in one before it goes to the other. And I don't know if that's part of the load development or not.
So I have worked in stormwater a bit, and again, this is the jurisdiction I was working with was the city of Portland. So they maybe have a little bit different idea, but we would not. When I was working there, the city of Portland would not consider detention ponds an LID BMP. An LID BMP would be like rain gardens, potentially green streets, pervious pavements, green
infiltration.
Roofs.
Right.
Sure. Infiltration is always going to be part of it for sure. Yeah. But this has part of that. It sounds like some of the roof runoff will be infiltrated. I guess one thing that came up is the high water levels. I'm not sure how much good infiltration is going to do us with such a high water table, compared to.
Well, again, I mean, might depend on the material they're importing for fill also. But
yeah, except it's going to get the native flow.
4 points. So if we take away the 3 points for the traditional neighborhood design, because it doesn't meet all of those items that we looked at, right?
Yeah, they're still good for that. They're still good if that's all we take away. But yeah, I don't know. I guess
they have 1 extra point to give away before two before they wouldn't meet it, right? Or 1.
Yeah, and okay, all right, here it is. Here's a little some examples. Those common LID practices include bioretention, rain gardens, permeable pavements, minimal excavation foundations, vegetated roofs, and rainwater harvesting. So I guess to me, what sort of sets an LID apart from just any old stormwater BMP, is that it's, those things are just different, right? They aren't putting it into a stormwater pond. They aren't dumping it in the backyard. Unfortunately, all we've got to go on is these kind of squishy, our relatively squishy code, unfortunately, would just say has to use LID management. And then, the Department of Ecology doesn't really define LID very well.
So the next step in the process, will be where all the engineering really is designed, and that's where LID could be more of a part of it. We could always move forward with a condition that the PERD stuff is more clearly addressed. I mean, that's an
okay.
option.
Melissa would, please.
Travis?
Sure, I'll add a little bit more.
Sorry, go ahead.
Travis, would you like me to talk a little bit, or did you want to go ahead?
So you did this part of the analysis, so you can maybe weigh in on it as well. I just also wanted to point out that for low impact, they are also proposing skinny streets. So they have reduced the amount of impervious surface, because I think it would normally be a 34-foot street, and they're proposing, or 36, and I think they're proposing 32s and 28s. So they are doing some reduction.
Which is good. Yeah, I love that. Again, I'm just not like, yes, do that. I'm not sure that it meets our standard for LID. Anyway, Melissa, please.
Okay, so I'll start through these backward. You brought up the circulation, and it does feel a little bit like a double dip. There was the internal circulation and the external connection, the first being 3 points and then 6 points for external connection. And I thought long and hard about this one, but looking in code, I don't see that they're exclusive. It does seem like they might be, because the external connection is valued higher, but they are two different types of connections, and they've done both. So I did count 3 and 6 points there. As far as low impact development, yeah, you were right. It was just the stormwater, or I should say the wet ponds, we're calling them, that I counted, the one for the subdivision and the one for Department of Transportation. So perhaps there might be an opportunity to add a little bit more, like a rain garden, or we could ask for something else to make that a little bit more point worthy, if you would like to. And as far as traditional neighborhood, you may have a point there as I'm looking at this, but what I used to evaluate that was in 16.22.075 Woodland Municipal Code, then section A2. And when I read here, it's the one and two family homes on small lots, narrow front yards, front porches, gardens. Some of that we'll have to see in the building phase. So we do have a condition that we will look at the proposed building plans and make sure that they match what they've said that they will do as far as the PURD before the building permits are issued. And then it says utilizing the standards of the section that you referenced, 17.16.090. So when I read through that, I didn't read that it was, I didn't interpret that as every item on that list, but I see why you have. So that could be a possible deduction of 3 points there. Or we could, you could write a recommendation that they swap for different points and give them an opportunity.
Okay, yeah, I mean, because again, like, I think these, you know, a lot of work went into our PERD code. It's not perfect, but I think, you know, as it stands, we have to abide by it. So, yeah, I guess if we can condition it so that, you know, they still, because right now, I guess the one that's, I think you're right about the, you know, the internal circulation. I think that's something that we should add to our cleaning up the code list, because that is, to me, ambiguous. And, you know, I think in this case, you're right. We got to give them the benefit of the doubt and give them both, because it does not say that you can't do one or the other. But as I read that, I think it should say that you can't do one or the other. So
It just means no cul-de-sacs.
Yeah, I don't know if I 100% agree with you on that, Tel. I mean, you can have internal circulation and also exterior connection. Internal circulation just means that the way I look at it is that all parts of the development are interconnected, but you still want that development exteriorly connected to other roads around it. I think you can have both.
yeah, but the bullet, both of them include interior connection. So one of them is interior connection, the other one is interior connection and exterior connection. If it was one was interior and one was exterior, I'm okay with that. But it seems like
maybe I misunderstood you.
Yeah, it's just, again, I think that's something we need to clean up. I don't think that's an issue for this, particular applicant, but I think that's something we should definitely address.
What do you think about moving forward with just the condition that the applicant demonstrates how they more clearly demonstrates how they qualify as a PERD? Would that ease some of that?
That would satisfy me. I'd be interested to hear what staff thinks about that. If that is,
yes,
I guess an enforceable or a condition that that's tenable.
I thought we can kind of, I don't want this to sound terrible, but I thought, as a board that we can come up with kind of whatever conditions we want if, it's up to us, right?
Yeah, no, you're right. I just don't want it to be, I don't want it to be a meaningless condition, right? Like, I don't want it to be a condition that, like, either we can't hold them to in some way or that they are not able to meet for some reason. So I guess, I'm interested in hearing from Melissa and Travis what they think about that. But, conditioning, say, a condition that all, adequate PERD points are, demonstrated. And I think, at this point, if the LID one is settled, then I think that would take care of it, regardless of the traditional development. It's not settled to my satisfaction, but, I'm obviously just one part of this conversation. So.
Well, and I would like to point out that now that you've raised the issue, your job is to make a recommendation to the city council. So if you think you need to add a caveat to that recommendation, that gives the applicant and the engineer or the consulting engineer to develop that argument so that when staff does take this to the city council and we pose that question that you've posed to, or the recommendation that you've posed to them, it gives them the opportunity to make the argument and the council would ultimately make that decision.
Right. Okay, yeah, that sounds good to me. I'm curious what it sounds like to the rest of the commission. Yeah, okay.
I'm fine with that.
Makes sense. They seem amenable to that, I would imagine.
Okay, and Melissa, thank you for. I mean, that PERD code is kind of it's a lot, so I appreciate your work on that, and I don't mean to.
Okay, is it too soon to make a motion then on this, Tel? What do you think? Did you have something else you wanted to talk about?
I do, the parking issue. I do want to make sure that we get that, because I think that could really, in this town, people are really touchy about parking, and I think it would be a shame for it to scuttle everything. Because I am all for narrower streets. I think we need those. If I had my way, they could park on both sides, and then it wouldn't be an issue at all. Our fire trucks aren't 24 feet wide, so they don't actually need that much space. But somebody else, may bring that up.
So I can address that real quick. Let me get to a different map. But there is not all of the streets would be limited to single-sided parking. So in this case, the southern part of that loop coming off of Statesman is 28. So there would only be parking on one side of that southern connection, whereas the northern part that goes around the loop and connects to the state highway, that is 32. So there would be parking on both sides of that road, whereas the entire northern loop is 28. So there would be parking on one side on that northern loop. Also, as the applicant pointed out, they will have at least 2 car garages plus a double parking space on their driveway. So at a minimum, the lots will have 4. Some of them will have 5, depending on where they are.
All right, so they're good already. Okay, great. Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't thought of that the driveway and the garage would count separately. And you all know if I had my way, they wouldn't be allowed to have any parking. But yeah, thank you. That addresses that. I think, yeah, those were my. I think those are, you know, my concerns. Have pretty much been addressed. I have some, you know, the way we calculate density, I think is a little wacky. I think we should probably include the streets in our acreage calculation. It doesn't really make sense to just set aside that. I mean, it's still our city. It's still taking up space. So I think you know, the units per acre should include everything, but it doesn't for now. So yeah, those are my concerns. If anybody else has, make sure nobody else has anything to say. I'm ready to move forward.
Okay.
Yeah.
I move that we approve the subdivision subject to the conditions that staff have indicated in the staff report, with the additional condition that the applicant demonstrates clearly how they meet the PERD scoring system.
I like that. Can I get a second?
Second.
All right. Motion has been made and seconded. Janice, if you're around, I think we should do a roll call vote. Couldn't quite hear you, so I'm gonna call the roll. Brian Matson.
Aye.
Jason Lugo.
Aye.
Sam Nago.
Aye.
Tel Jensen. Aye. All right, motion carries. Thanks a lot. Good work, everybody. I know that took a little while, but I appreciate your patience. So we can close the public hearing for that item. And next up on our agenda are commissioner comments. Anybody have anything else to say? I'll spare you.
I'm
gonna say no. All right. Okay. So then, have any more staff reports?
Oh, nothing more from staff.
Okay, great. I think that's it. You know, that wasn't our fastest, but that was pretty good for a big issue. So thanks, everybody. I appreciate you being here on a school night and staying late and having good things to say. And all the public who's here, thank you so much for joining us. I know it's less than ideal in many ways to do this remotely, so appreciate your patience. Someday we'll beat this plague and we'll be able to see each other's faces again. So thanks, everybody, and don't stop being involved. You know, keep having your say as much as you're able to. I know it's not always easy, but I hope it is rewarded. And other than that, see everybody next month. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks, staff. You all did a great job. I really appreciate it.